What is going on, everyone? Welcome to the Slaw Sports Show. I'm your host, as always, Cole Noble, aka Slaw. Hope you guys enjoyed my UFC 264 predictions. We finished 3-2 on the weekend in UFC 264, losing our two with Wonder Boy. Didn't come out on top, and Conor McGregor with that gruesome broken leg that he had against Dustin Poirier in the end of round one. But today, we're back for another top five episode that we're doing now on a weekly basis that we hope to continue on every Wednesday as we go forward. Last week, we did my top five teams that I think will blow up their rosters after the 2021 2022 NFL season. Today, we're going to be doing my top five players that I think will have breakout years this year. We've got a lot of offensive players, but we do have one defensive player in mind. Inside my top five list. So I'm excited for this list, excited to see what you guys think and if you agree or not. So let's go ahead and get right to the video. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. And like we always do every week when I do these top five lists, we've done three now so far, I believe. What I like to do is give, of course, the top five going from 5 to 1 in order of who I think, will be the top one, obviously the number one for whichever top five list I'm doing. So this week, my number one guy is going to be the guy I think will be the number one breakout player in the league. So you get the gist of it. But what I also do is throw in two honorable mention players as well, or honorable mention teams as well, depending on what the list is we're doing this week. But today it will be players with my breakout players for the 2021-2022 NFL season. So I do have two honorable mentions to keep in mind before we get into our top five. So let's go ahead and just get right into it. Get right into our honorable mentions. So my number one honorable mention on my list is coming out of Jacksonville with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going to go with wide receiver Laviska Shenault. He's going into year two with now a new offense, new head coach in Urban Meyer, and of course, new quarterback with number one overall pick Trevor Lawrence. Last year, Laviska Shenault showed a little bit of how he can be a dynamic playmaker once he finally got over to the Jaguars. Show that he can give an offensive coordinator the creative weapon that one would want in their offense as an offensive coordinator. A really just do it all player for your offense. And Laviska Shenault started to thrive in that role late in the season. Gave us a lot of a glimpse of what we could see from him this year. So Laviska Shenault, I think, is just an all-around playmaker, a guy that can do it all. You look at what he did do last year: 58 receptions, 600 yards, 5 touchdowns in his rookie year. Also had 18 rushes as a wide receiver. Getting in the backfield, getting some backfield work, and some carries as well. Really just speaks in volume to what this guy can do in an offense. Like I said, do it all. He can be a short guy. He can be a downfield threat. You can put him in the backfield. You can do a lot with his playmaking ability. It's the same thing we saw back 2 years back in Colorado, and during his time in college at Colorado, he was that same way, dynamic player, dynamic playmaker, and got the job done no matter what was asked of him. But the real issue with Laviska Shenault and why he's not in my top five is the fact that the Jaguars seem to have drafted that guy this year in Travis Etienne, the backfield mate of Trevor Lawrence. And one of the most shocking picks, in my opinion, of the entire first round was Jacksonville selecting him with their second pick in the first round. And from what we've heard, Urban Meyer is fascinated with the receiving ability of Travis Etienne. And you start getting him a lot of receiving targets, plus the work he's doing in the backfield. It's starting to sound like he could be the do-it-all player that we thought Laviska Shenault could be this year. So still want to see what happens in training camp. Wants to start getting some looks at the offense and the depth charts and how things are going to run in Jacksonville with this new offense, and see just how much of an impact both Travis Etienne and Laviska Shenault will have in this offense. Will give us a better idea of what Laviska Shenault really has the potential to be this year with the Jaguars offense. So I got an honorable mention. I think he still can have a breakout year. But still, one big question mark to keep in mind as we approach the start of training camp. So my number two on the, again, honorable mention We're going to go up to Minnesota this time, the state with 10,000 lakes or 11,000 lakes. But Minnesota, let's go with Irv Smith Jr. at tight end as my next player on the honorable mention. This one's simple. Kyle Rudolph is finally out of town. He's out of the picture. This is now the Irv Smith show in Minnesota. He's the tight end one. Now, probably going to be, I would say, the number 4 could challenge up to the number 3 option in the offense with Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and Dalvin Cook up there as the top 3 guys. I think Irv Smith could be that number 4 guy. That would be a huge threat to the passing offense and a huge boost for Kirk Cousins in the passing game with the Minnesota Vikings this year. So tight end 1 in Minnesota, Irv Smith's ready to go. He's ready to run right into it and take off running, full head of steam. We've seen a lot of production already so far out of Irv Smith Jr. since he's made his way into the NFL with the Minnesota Vikings. When he finally started getting some playing time, just look at these numbers. In his first 2 seasons alone, Irv Smith Jr. had 90-plus targets. He had 125.0 passer rating when the quarterback, which has mainly been Kirk Cousins, has targeted him in this offense. Only 3 drops in his career, all to go along with 7 touchdowns in those 2 seasons. This guy is just a production machine that's going to continue. And this year, when with Kyle Rudolph out of the picture now, Irv Smith really has the volume and target share potential to now come his way, get an immense amount of more targets, which means an immense amount of more production going on his resume this year. So that's why I think he's going to be a breakout. The only thing I have with Irv Smith is where he's sitting at in terms of target share in this offense and what Mike Zimmer wants to do with this offense and what the team wants to do with the offense. Are they going to rely solely on Dalvin Cook in the run game, or are they going to let Kirk Cousins kind of try to air it out, or are they just going to be balanced? And I think that's the worst case scenario for Irv Smith, is running a balanced offense. The only opportunities he's going to get to really shine will be the red zone. With the downfield guys going to be Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen in that offense. So it'll be just something to watch again, how this offense looks like they're going to run come training camp. We'll get a better idea of what to expect from Irv Smith in terms of his potential. So let's go ahead and now get into our top 5. The honorable mentions are out of the way. So now let's get to top 5 breakout players for the 2021-2022 NFL season. Going with offense again here, number 5, we got a little bit of a, you're going to have to hang with me here, tie, if you will. But it's 2 players in the same offense at the same position. We're going to go to Indianapolis with Michael Pittman Jr. and Paris Campbell. I think both of them could be breakout players this year, and I couldn't pick one to be on this top 5 list. So I'm going with both of them neck and neck as a tie for 5. Just same wide receiver, same position at wide receiver, same offense in Indianapolis. So I'm going to put both of them here. Both I've seen time and time again as potential breakouts, and I have to agree with both players. So I'm putting both of them here at number 5. I think the upside for these, both these guys is going to be real. With Carson Wentz now as their quarterback in Indianapolis, Phillip Rivers retired and gone. Now they brought in Carson Wentz back into the offense with Frank Wright that took the Eagles to the Super Bowl. And of course, Carson Wentz ended up getting hurt right before the playoffs that year, but he still had close to an MVP-like season under Frank Wright. I expect him to bounce back from what we've seen the last couple of years in Philadelphia, back with Frank Wright in Indianapolis, and have a great year with the Colts. And the reason behind that is going to be these 2 wide receivers. I think the Colts have a sneaky good wide receiver room with T.Y. Hilton, Paris Campbell, Michael Pittman Jr., and Zach Pascal as well. 4, I think, really solid wide receivers to have in your room. There's a lot of talk and a lot of anger around the Colts organization. They didn't pursue a Julio Jones. They didn't pursue top wide receivers on the market like a Kenny Golladay. But still, I think they have a pretty solid core around them to work with Carson Wentz. And, great committee in the backfield as well. A lot of people, the same thing, are wanting a lot more workload for Jonathan Taylor, but I think they're fine with working that as a committee, and I think it'll work out fine for them as well, and just make the focus of this team their offensive line and their defense. But I think Michael Pittman and Paris Campbell, back to these 2 guys, I think they're going to have breakout years from what we've seen from them so far in their careers. With Carson Wentz this year, Let's start off first with Michael Pittman. He's entering into year two, and he got overshadowed a lot in his rookie year by his fellow rookie classmates, specifically Justin Jefferson and another name we'll talk about here real soon. But Michael Pittman, I think he's likely going to become that premier perimeter guy in this offense. T.Y. Hilton currently serves with that role, but I think Michael Pittman will get groomed into being more of the wide receiver one in this offense and end up having the targets to show that as well, with just how T.Y. Hilton, where he's at in his career and his abilities. I think Michael Pittman might end up jumping him in terms of targets in this offense. And I think he's, with that, with the targets I just talked about, he will be Wentz's top option as the season goes along. And all of that's going to pay dividends in terms of the return on investment that he's going to get with those targets. Last year, he had 40 receptions, put up 503 yards and a touchdown. But if you think about it, had surgery, partway through the year, missed some time, missed a lot of games. But when he came back, out of those 503 yards, he had 368 and that lone touchdown during the final 8 games of the season, and had a great game in the wild card round, I believe it was, against the Buffalo Bills. And that first game against the playoffs, or in the playoffs against the Bills, Michael Pittman had a great game in that one. So I think Michael Pittman's going to take that next step this year as a wide receiver in this offense. But right behind him will be Paris Campbell. And Paris Campbell so far has looked like a bust since coming out of Ohio State. But he's a guy who's back to being 100% healthy. And from what I've heard and the interviews I've seen with Paris Campbell, he's eager to want to prove himself and prove to the team that he can still compete and be a guy in this offense. So I think, with that 4.31 speed that he possesses, I think he's going to be that chunk play guy for the Colts this year. If he's fully healthy, plays all the games, he's definitely going to, shoot up his production increase from what we've seen his first 2 years. His rookie year is played by injuries. Last year, he had that season-ending knee injury in week 2. And, he's only had 24 receptions and 198 yards in his career through 2 seasons. Not what you want, but I think that's going to skyrocket this year. He's finally going to have a productive season, the first one of his career in the NFL. And I think, in terms of what, he's done the first 2 years, this will be a breakout year for Paris Campbell. And he's going to break out from what we expected and from what we've seen from him thus far. So that's why I got both guys, Michael Pittman Jr. and Paris Campbell, at a tie here for 5. Just same offense, same position. I have them here sitting at 5. So now let's go to number 4, and we go to Green Bay, Wisconsin, with my favorite team here on the Slaw Sports Show. And we're going to go with our first and only defensive player on our top 5 list. And we're going to go with Rashawn Gary. I'm taking Rashawn Gary over Darnell Savage to be a breakout player this year on the Packers defense. Both players came out of the same draft class, have both played 2 years in the NFL now. But Rashawn Gary, I think, is the one to break out this year. I just think we've already seen productive seasons so far out of Darnell Savage, and he's right there, already getting a lot of praise at his position since he came in out of Maryland. But I think Rashawn Gary is the one not many people are talking about, and the one that's going to be the one to break out this year and really start getting some buzz. Everything I've seen in minicamp and everything I've read has said that Rashawn Gary has been the best player on the field for the Packers throughout minicamp, and I expect to see that continuing once we get toward training camp as well. And that actually came from Bill Huber for Sports Illustrated. Bill Huber is the one that said that he was the best player in mini camp, right ahead of training camp. And Rashawn Gary, when the Packers drafted him, they drafted him to be a developmental player on their defensive line that's going to take a couple years to really figure out his skill set and his physical tools. And I think now entering into year 3, he's starting to do so, starting to put it together and starting to learn defensive schemes, starting to learn, how to do the right moves, when to do the right things. And he's starting to really just overall piece it all together on this defense. And that's why I think this year is going to be his breakout year for the Packers defense. Just overall, I think he's just going to end up demanding more playing time on this defensive line. You got to think he's still on the depth chart behind Zadarius Smith and Preston Smith, both guys who have huge cap numbers and a lot of money going their way on the Packers books. So he's still going to be sitting behind those 2 guys on the defense, on the defensive edge. but I think he will start to garnish some more playing time. Talk about some second or third quarters. He's going to get a lot more snap counts going his way in a lot of key situations. And last year, he put together a decent year, I would say, considering the amount of playing time he had and the what he produced in year one as a rookie. But last year, final stats had 5 sacks, 11 quarterback hits, and actually ended up finishing ninth on the next gen stats, I believe top 10 Top 10 disruptors. That's what it was. On Next Gen Stats, Rashawn Gary finished ninth, and they had their collection of stats that Next Gen Stats is tremendous at putting together to come up with these lists. But that was a name not many people expected to see on a top 10 disruptors list was Rashawn Gary. But he had a great year last year, specifically a 3-game stretch. There late in the season, the last 2 games of the regular season, and the divisional round playoff game against the LA Rams. Rashawn Gary put together 14 pressures and had 9 stops in that 3-game stretch, and actually finished with ranked as an elite PFF Pro Football Focus, an elite grade in 2 of those last 3 games, excluding the NFC Championship against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But the last 2 games of the regular season in the divisional round against the LA Rams, Rashawn Gary played great, actually played elite in those 3 games. So I think this year it's really going to come together for Rashawn Gary with the playing time, demanding that increase in playing time, demanding more snaps, while also starting to really figure out his abilities as a pass rusher is really going to come to fruition this year for Rashawn Gary. You think back to his rookie year and how he jumped into year 2, he more than doubled his snap counts going into year 2. I think we could see that maybe again going into year 3 with demanding that more playing time. And everything, all the signs point to having a great year this year and a lot more improvement going forward for Rashawn Gary on the Packers defensive line. All right, so let's get now to number 3, my number 3 player on my top 5 breakouts for the 2021-2022 NFL season. Let's go to San Francisco, keep it in the NFC, and go with Brandon Ayuk, another player going into year 2, just like we talked about with Michael Pittman. With the Indianapolis Colts, another year 2 wide receiver here with Brandon Ayuk with the San Francisco 49ers. I think he's set up for a huge second-year jump this year and will end up being one of the NFL's best big play wide receivers. I'm saying that now. I think Brandon Ayuk has that type of potential this year with the 49ers offense. And it all starts with quarterback, because Brandon Ayuk alone is a dynamic, playmaker. And when the ball is in his hands, he does great things. Same thing we saw him out of college. Look back to all my draft talk last year. I loved Brandon Ayuk. He was my favorite wide receiver in the entire draft last year. And I still feel that same way because of how dynamic and explosive this guy is with the ball in his hands. This guy is like Deebo Samuel 2.0, but even better than Deebo Samuel. And it's fitting he ended up getting drafted in that same offense. Last year, he played great. He averaged 12.8 yards rushing as a wide receiver, while 12.5 yards receiving, yards per reception, 12.5 yards per reception, and had 7 total touchdowns and only played 12 games with 11 starts, I believe, and racked up 289 yards after the catch. All these stats point to how explosive this guy was. But you think about it, all of those stats came with 3 different quarterbacks last year. The 49ers were plagued with injuries, Brandon Ayuk included, but played offensively and defensively with injuries all over. 49ers, that's what led up to the terrible year they had last year, trying to bounce back from the Super Bowl loss. But Brandon Ayuk played with Jimmy Garoppolo for 3 games, Nick Mullins for 7 games, and CJ Beathard for 2 games, and still put up those insane stats. Averaged over 12 yards rushing, averaged over 12 yards per reception as well. This guy was still a playmaker and just electric with the ball in his hands. And this year, he's looking to have a lot more consistency at the quarterback position. Jimmy Garoppolo's healthy, but inevitably Trey Lance, number 3 overall pick, will take over. And this guy's got a rocket arm. Will help out the rushing game as well as a dual threat guy who loves to use his legs like we saw at North Dakota State. But this guy's got a great arm and is really great at hitting those guys in the middle of the field, which is where Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel and George Kittle will all operate. But when Brandon Ayuk gets that ball in his hands, Kyle Shanahan's an offensive genius. He will scheme things up, with some jet sweeps, some handoffs, some pitches, whatever it takes to get the ball immediately, even screens, whatever it takes to get the ball immediately into Brandon Ayuk's hands and let him work. Kyle Shanahan will draw them up and will make it happen with his offense, no matter who is at quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance. But I did mention Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. I think that target share with those three guys, it's going to mean Brandon Ayuk's target share is lower than expected when the year starts out. But both those guys, Deebo Samuel and George Kittle, we've seen it year after year. They miss time eventually with injury. Might end up happening again this year at some point. So Brandon Ayuk will start out slow, but will really start to get things going and pick things up once that target share increases. And once Trey Lance enters the fold, it's gone from there. It's the rocket show, and that thing will take off with that offense. So I'm really excited about Brandon Ayuk entering year two. Disappointed where he ended up, but I think it's a great situation for him and his career. And this guy is going to literally explode next year with the San Francisco 49ers. And I'm excited to watch that happen. All right, so number 2 on my list, again, keeping it in the NFC, going here now with the New Orleans Saints, and we're going to go with tight end Adam Troutman. And tight end Adam Troutman, he's my guy that I predict will be the Rob Tonyan of the NFL this year. We all know Rob Tonyan broke out in the scene last year with the Green Bay Packers, ended up leading all tight ends in touchdowns, went over double-digit touchdowns with the number one offense in the Green Bay Packers with this man up here, Aaron Rodgers, at quarterback. But I think Adam Troutman has that type of potential, the type of Rob Tonyan type of breakout year this year at the tight end position. That's what I'm expecting. Adam Troutman, he is now the tight end one of this offense with the team moving on from Jared Cook. Jared Cook going to the LA Chargers. But that cap situation with the Saints required them to move on from Jared Cook. And I believe there's a reason for that. I think the Saints are always historically quiet of who they're passionate about and the guys that they love and want to keep secrets for a reason. I think Adam Troutman's that next man up that they're keeping a secret right now and moved on from Jared Cook. And they're trying to keep Adam Troutman under the rug for as long as possible until they eventually utilize him and exploit him as a X factor weapon of this offense. So I think he's going to be, like I said, tight end one, of course, but I think he's going to be the number 3 option in this New Orleans Saints offense, which year after year is one of the top offenses in the league. He's going to be right there behind Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas as that number 3 guy for either Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston. I think going to be Jameis Winston. Once training camp rolls along, we'll see him end up being the starting quarterback. But Adam Troutman is going to be that go-to short to intermediate type of tight end in this offense. And if Jameis Winston is the quarterback for the Saints, once the season starts in week 1, he traditionally is so much more efficient when he's targeting tight ends. And he is at his best as a quarterback with a great tight end. We saw it with Cameron Brate and O.J. Howard those years in Tampa Bay. This year, Adam Troutman is going to come onto the scene and be that guy for Jameis Winston. So if Winston starts at quarterback and plays out the rest of the season at quarterback, Troutman has now all the volume to produce a great year. We haven't seen much from him. Last year, right behind Jared Cook in the shadows, had 15 receptions for 171 yards. Great average there. When you talk about yards per reception, and 1 touchdown as well. So this year, Adam Troutman is going to be that guy in this offense, be that number 3 guy, and be one of the favorite targets for Jameis Winston in this passing game. And you just have to listen to what Sean Payton talks about. Sean Payton's a master at putting in little quotes here and there about guys he likes to try to keep things under the rug. But if you look closely and you dig, you'll find these quotes. We're going all the way back to November with this one. Sean Payton had this to say about Adam Troutman. He said, "We got to keep finding ways to get him in the passing game." They moved on from Jared Cook. He's now that number 1 guy. So just those little things, those little sparks of quotes from Sean Payton is the things you got to pick up with that guy. So he's wanting to get Adam Troutman more involved, and I think he'll do so in a big way this year. And like I said, it'd be that Bob Tonyan type of breakout player at tight end. So I think Adam Troutman's gonna have a great year. Could end up getting 7+ touchdowns this year with the New Orleans Saints. That's why I have him at my number 2 on the breakout players for this year. So without further ado, give the drum roll here. Go to our number 1 breakout player in the NFL this season. I'm going to go in the NFC, back in the NFC North. Let's go to Chicago with Darnell Mooney at wide receiver. The stars are all aligned for Mooney to have a breakout year and being the wide receiver 2 of this Bears offense. And I think can show this year he has wide receiver 1 potential. With all the issues right now going on and the back and forth with Allen Robinson, the Chicago Bears still trying to work out an extension right now on that franchise tag. I think Mooney, with a strong year this year, can prove that he has the ability. If the team needs to, and it comes to that situation and move on from Allen Robinson, they'll feel comfortable with Mooney stepping up in year 3 next year as that number 1 guy. But for this year, the stars are all aligned for him to break out and prove that to the Chicago Bears. I'm expecting him to have much, much more consistent QB play. No more Nick Foles. No more Mitch Trubisky. I mean, Nick Foles is still there for now, but I hope we don't see him on the field. But, no offense over here to Nick Foles. But, of course, Mitch Trubisky is the big one. He's finally gone with the Chicago Bears, which means this offense can be a lot more consistent and efficient as an entire unit, whether it's Andy Dalton, who eventually will start the year, but eventually and inevitably, they will have to move this offense into the hands of Justin Fields. And that's when it's time with Darnell Mooney, just like I talked about with Brandon Ayuk when Trey Lance takes over. Same thing with Mooney when Justin Fields takes over as well. It's going to be time for him to explode. Last year as a rookie, he had 61 receptions, 631 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Pretty solid statistical standpoint as a rookie for a rookie wide receiver. When you think about the QB play the Bears had, the division they're playing in, the tough opponents and schedule they had for wide receivers. But the one thing to keep in mind with Darnell Mooney in terms of him potentially being a breakout player, last year in his rookie year, he had 10 uncatchable deep ball targets thanks to Mitch Trubisky. Plays where he burnt, we'll pull the tape here and, we'll have it playing as I'm talking about it. But you look at these plays. He had a play against Jalen Ramsey and a play against, I believe, Carlton Davis with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers where he straight up had the guy burnt. And Jalen Ramsey is a top 3 wide receiver, arguably, one of the top, some people have him at number 1 as the top cornerback in the league. And Darnell Mooney in his rookie year put him on skates a couple of times and had him beat deep downfield, unfortunately only to get overthrown or, completely missed by Mitch Trubisky. And it's terrible to see that happen. But now this year with Andy Dalton, who's a lot more of a consistent and accurate quarterback, and especially with Justin Fields, who's a very accurate quarterback coming in the NFL this year, and one of his strong characteristics as a passer is his accuracy. Now with Darnell Mooney, he has the chance to really shine with his deep threat ability and be able to hit those, get somebody that can hit those throws when he's wide open and take those to big plays and take those all the way for touchdowns. All in all, the stars are going to align this year for Darnell Mooney to break out and have a strong season this year with the Chicago Bears. This is a guy in fantasy you definitely need to target. Especially some of these other guys. Adam Troutman is a great late round tight end you can target who's starting to rise up. A lot of fantasy guys out there are starting to really, hit hard on the Adam Troutman height. So get him while you still can and while he's still at a bargain and a great, average draft position is that right now because he's going to start rising quickly. But Darnell Mooney, of course, is that same way. Target him in fantasy. He has huge big play potential and, deep threat potentials that will end up turning to, the big plays and the long touchdown passes within the Chicago Bears offense. And just a quote, again, I want to pull here from head coach Matt Nagy of the Chicago Bears. He said, Darnell Mooney's a deep threat in our offense, and what he's doing in OTAs, he's gotten even better. So minicamp, Matt Nagy is impressed with what he's seen from Darnell Mooney going into year 2. Expect that to be the same once we get into training camp and things start rolling on for the start of the season. Darnell Mooney is in prime position to have a breakout and be the breakout player out of the entire NFL, I believe, this season. So that's my top 5 breakout players for my top 5 list this week. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys think. Comment down below, like and share with a friend if you guys have anything else to say. Also, follow us on Twitter. You can interact with us there at Slaw Sports Show as well. But thank you all for watching. And until next time, peace.